Woo again. Here we go. What content creators are not telling you about Mandani. Mamdani. For this video, I'm really talking about a lot of people, but I think when it comes to people just being dead wrong, I gotta bring up Amazing Lucas. His take on Mamdani winning the primary for mayor of New York was that it was an example of Black Americans being extinct because he won the primary without the black vote. Now, if you really zoom in, it's a little bit more complex than that. But the main thing is he hasn't won. He is not the mayor. And different forces, especially in the Democratic Party, they're going to throw a whole lot at him. So, let's take a step back. What is missing from the conversation? How can good old 42 Tribes fill you in on something that's missing? Well, in a sense, I agree with Amazing Lucas. What you see is sort of what you get. Mamdani had a surprise and dominant victory over Andrew Cuomo, but he lost the black vote. And you can make an argument about the black vote's worth when it can go against a candidate in the primary. And, New York is, from what I've heard, as much as 12 to 15. It's like the national average in terms of what percentage of the population is black. But New York's maybe a little different than other areas in the sense that the black vote is extra democratic, and not just extra democratic when it comes to older voters. And what I mean by extra democratic is they don't just vote as a block for Democrats. They vote as a vote. They vote as a block for where the Democratic Party tells them to vote for. They're very obedient. The Democratic Party symbol is a jackass, and this jackass is not like the servile beast of the field. This jackass says, black people, you need to vote like this, and they do it. Now, it's been said, a lot of people have said, I've heard this often, that black Americans vote conservative, so they might not be as hunky-dory for a democratic socialist. That's BS. Black Americans are the most progressive liberal voters in the US. And it's more so black Americans like ADOS, and as people know, FBA. I don't go by that, but I don't have a problem with it. To each their own. Well, actually, I do have a problem, but that's a long story, so I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to, I'm olive branching it out to people who go by FBA. I don't think that they're mainly the problem in the equation, but they tend to vote more loyal as Democrats, ADOS and FBA, than black immigrants even. So it's the Democrats' base. It's the X factor in any type of close election. So when it's not the X factor, I get where Amazing Lucas is coming from. Now they don't need to ask for your vote. But the problem is, Mamdani hasn't won yet, and he has to go against whatever homoculi billionaire that the corporatists throw at this quote-unquote communist. He gets a little communistic with his rhetoric. And I will say, yeah, there are certain black Americans who get alarmed when somebody's talking about we need to take control of the means of production. That sounds wacko. But democratic socialists, yeah, that usually floats. The problem is there is a strong essence of class reductionism where the Republicans say, hey, you're a permanent bottom class, and we kind of like it, but whatever. The Democrats say, hey, you're a permanent bottom class, but we don't like it. So we have these totally ineffective people of color party policies that will trickle down to you. You'll get trickle down economics. The Bernie Sanders types, the more liberal, and kind of like me, I'm more in the semi-socialist camp. So I'm okay in general with a lot of the politics of the left. So they come, and their case to Black Americans is, you're permanent bottom class, but we're going to lift up the bottom for everybody. And then they'll start talking biblical like the neoliberal Democrats, and then they'll whip out some hot sauce, and nobody really checks them for it hardly. Like when in terms of white pundits who are more liberal, the alt left does not check them for it. They are as comfortable as in a caste system as the neoliberal, and they don't seem to care. So when what happened with Mamdani, the youth vote for everybody offset the older vote in the Democratic primary. The boomers got punked. And that's why the boomers are like, you talk about some bunched up panty tweets. Look at boomers reacting to Mamdani. So that happens. The younger vote in kind of odd fashion, especially for a primary and especially for a mayor's race, the younger vote just says, hey, nah, we're doing this. They came out in force, but the young black vote didn't. And I think part of the reason the young black vote didn't is because you do have a lot, and Amazing Lucas criticized low-key reparationists who want more for their vote. So a lot of these people stayed home. They weren't voting for Cuomo. They weren't voting for anybody, including Mamdani. Some of them didn't know about Mamdani. Maybe if there was more name recognition, it would have helped some. But definitely the young black vote, while it did go for Mamdani, it wasn't charged enough to overcome the Hucklebuck boomers. And I've said this, I don't know if I've said it on my channel, but I think in a sense, the Hucklebuck boomers, the Democratic loyalists, protect the majority of black voters from these sort of class reductionists who are offering to just raise the bottom and you with it. And you'll still be a bottom caste, but that bottom will be even sweeter than it already is. And they protect us from that. Now, granted, they sell out to a different type of beast that isn't worth anything. I mean, I would say even with this whole thing about Mamdani applying for Columbia as an Asian African American, which again goes into why I'm all for this whole disaggregation movement and identifying an ethnicity amongst Black Americans. Why I made that video criticizing how the I think it was like NAACP and the Urban League went against the vote that we had to change our ethnicity from African Americans to American descendants of slavery. That had the votes, but these dinosaur organizations who haven't done their job, they went to ruin the job that we were doing. And this is why we were doing that job, because Mamdani was born in Uganda. Culturally, he's probably Ugandan. Ethnically, maybe not. But nationality-wise, as far as his nation is Ugandan. He came, his father got a scholarship through a program that was going to African Americans. And that's how he moved to this country. So he rode on that, and he still didn't even get in to Columbia, which is kind of funny. So I'm disagreeing with Amazing Lucas because now we don't know where Black New Yorkers are going to go when it comes to voting for Eric Adams. Eric Adams has a little bit of leverage, even though he's kind of gone Trumpaloo, and that's the crazy thing. That's still, I'm not even sure, even with the Democratic Hucklebuck loyalists, that they're not willing to stall him out over that, just because they are somewhat into that whole thing, where like into some of his bootstrap politics. And to be fair, understandably so, and this applies to a lot of younger black voters in New York, is after a while, Eric Adams, I think, made the right decision to put his foot down and said, stop bringing all these immigrants here unless you blow up the resources. And even if you do blow up the resources, how is that going to look when we're not blowing up the resources for New Yorkers who are already here, and they're hurting and the city's expensive? And he made that kind of populism / MAGA case. And in the situation that he was in, I think it worked. I can't find much disagreement. I'm not in favor of our immigration system. That's why I thought Yvette Carnell did her job, because the Democratic Party wasn't studying how it affects Black Americans, talking about immigration. She did her job when she went on the PFER board to monitor it. And like I said in the previous video, if she's unpaid, then how are we going to criticize her when you're telling us to vote for people who are getting money from Zionists? Because you're making this whole thing about white supremacy, and that's what Zionism is. That's an upcoming video, but a lot of people have done it. It's not like I'm saying anything new, but it needs to be said so I can reference something, because otherwise people are like, how? It's Jewish supremacy. Well, okay, you asked, so that's why I'll say it. It hasn't been said, and that's why I'm saying this about Mamdani. Black Americans, broken clockwise, indirectly, were smart not to vote for Mamdani, because now the fear that he could lose to Eric Adams, I don't think he will, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say, hey, let's blow up the black vote. Let's go out and get the black vote and get everything. Let's make a difference with that. And when you're going against Cuomo, who's against reparations, and Mandani has spoken in favor of reparations, I don't think it's on his website. And that's kind of an issue. But that's also a little bit of a long story. Maybe I'll get to it right now. If you're going against Eric Adams, who is, all pigment aside, he's an anti-black racist, like if you really go by his policies. And he's dumb, and he's really a kind of, he's one thing that I liked, is he stood up against Biden when it came to mass immigration and getting shoved, a bunch of unvetted people getting shoved up the buttocks of New York City. That sounds gross. But you see what I'm saying. Maybe he doesn't need it, but if you're going up against an anti-black racist, call him out. And I guess I'll go there where I was going. See, New York has a role in local reparations. Look, they can't afford real reparations, but they can afford to do something about Seneca Village. They can address that. They can come with a local reparations package. I think if Mamdani is really serious, he could make an argument to Trump at the federal level. And if he wasn't kind of like this wishy-washy type Bernie Sambocrat type issue type dude, I'm not, look, I like the anti-Zionist, but I'm not big on Mamdani. One thing that would make me big is if he said, look, we're going to create a register for American descendants of slavery in New York, and I'm going to go to Washington and make a federal case for New York, and, and then, of course, that would build out throughout the country. I think he's the type that can, behind closed doors, when it's not vanity and performative politics, be very persuasive. I like his potential to do that. If that was there, and if he was making it's the easiest argument in the world, the case for reparations for descendants of slavery, terrorism, and other jazz, it's the easiest argument. He can make it, and he can separate himself from the anti black Sambo that is Eric Adams. I don't know if he'll do that. And it might cost him. But at least, and that's why I disagree with Amazing Lucas, at least he may need it and he might have to do it to get things done. At least that's a possibility. There's leverage. There's as opposed to if black Americans wouldn't have voted for Mamdani. And here's, I mean, or would have strongly, then, you already have what you want. So now being the holdouts and being kind of an impression wise key holdout because of Eric Adams. I don't think Eric Adams has a chance because he's too Trumpish for the old guard and he's too Samboic for the young guard. Only the kind of people in the middle look at him and they are like, yo, he protected New York from Biden's nonsense. That's not going to be big with black Democrats. It's not going to be that big, but maybe not. And I don't know. I haven't really done that much analysis on it. I'm just kind of going by instinct. And if it ends up being a big deal and Eric Adams somehow makes like the ADOS case that this immigration was damaging to black Americans and I stood up for them while this guy was trying to pretend to be black so he could get affirmative action, you can make that case. And maybe it floats. I don't know. But at least black Americans have some leverage because they didn't automatically go hard for Mamdani. And you could say, but hey, they went hard from Cuomo and he lost. And I kind of agree with that. I think Mamdani is just a little too Barack Obama-ish to lose to someone like Eric Adams. He has just too much personality. His politics are too mainstream. It's too in the now. That's why boomers have a problem with it. And he said some communist stuff, but a lot of what he's saying is doable. Like the whole thing with free bus fare. Like I've seen that in cities in like a small downtown area where you have free bus fare, and that helps people. That's doable. That can be done. It's been done. Likewise, the thing it's kind of radical, the whole idea of a city-owned market. But if you have like this model has been kicked around, like we can all garden and share stuff, and we can all own this corporation, and then we can set the prices lower because we're not profiting from it and we're not relying to pay this CEO X amount of money. And maybe at times when things are blowing up we'll profit and the money's good, we'll profit. If not, we'll give people a deal and we'll cover it with tax dollars, which we can get because we can tax some of the richest people in the world because New York has incredible wealth inequality. That's typical mainstream shit. I'm glad that a lot of black Americans aren't on this class reductionism because unless you're really advocating hard and making a stance for reparations, then they're just going to offer you what I said before, which is they're going to raise the bottom and you're going to get trickle up economics, if that. But the reality is you'd have to really do it for a while, and I don't know if you can hold off Republicans with that, especially when the black vote isn't going to be strong when the reality isn't changing, and this hope lore that it can change based on real left-wing politics. I guess it's sort of reasonable, but we're talking about a wealth gap that's already created a caste and an array of ghettos all around the country. A little doesn't matter. It's not gonna matter, and it's all hypothetical. And it's all assuming that this type of politics could last and not just be overturned with the next Republican. So, and there is an opportunity to go on a strong FDR Democratic run with Trump doing the whole reverse 360 180 when it comes to the Epstein files and being Israel's bitch. So yeah, there's a snapback for the left, and Mamdani represents that snapback. But unless you're including a charged black vote with that snapback, I don't know how long it snaps back, if it does at all. That's it. I'll leave it at that. See you later.